On April 4, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. The suspected sniper, a man named James Earl Ray, was eventually caught and remained in prison until his death in 1998. But for 30 years, he proclaimed his innocence and insisted he had been unknowingly used as a patsy by the U.S. government. To this day, the case remains unresolved, as there is zero definitive proof Ray actually shot Dr. King. Here's just some reasons why many, including Dr. King's own family, believe the U.S. government was behind the assassination. The FBI is known to have sent Dr. King anonymous death threats and conducted a years-long campaign of surveillance, harassment, and intimidation. Not a single reputable eyewitness could clearly identify the sniper. And lastly, the recovered rifle could not be conclusively shown as having fired the murder bullet. Given the many layers to Dr. King's murder, I will focus on the hour around the assassination, analyzing the most common evidence cited in theories for and against a government conspiracy. All references are linked in the description below, and any concerns about me being biased can be redirected to my handler. In the spring of 1968, a 39-year-old Dr. King traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, to support a strike by mostly Black sanitation workers seeking higher wages and safer working conditions. His party booked him room 306 on the second floor of the Lorraine Motel, opening up to a balcony overlooking a street. The same balcony he was later fatally shot on. Interestingly enough, several officers have testified Dr. King never stayed overnight at the Lorraine on previous visits to Memphis, and was deliberately moved there due to how exposed it was. On the other hand, fellow civil rights activist Ralph Abernathy testified that they stayed there so often it was called the King Abernathy Suite. Contradictions like this will appear throughout the video. As for whether Abernathy's testimony was intentional disinformation, that's for you to decide. Shortly before leaving for dinner, Dr. King stepped out of his room and onto the veranda to speak with some acquaintances gathered below. At 6:01, a single shot rang out, striking his right cheek, tearing through his neck and spinal cord. He was eventually transported to a hospital, where he died an hour later. Just a few minutes before the assassination, a police tactical unit team, or TAC unit, mobilized because of the strike, entered a fire station right across from the motel. 11 of them went inside to take a break, while one patrolman, Emmett Douglas, was left to monitor the radio. Curiously, several of these TAC units were ordered to pull back from the Lorraine Motel that morning, though the scale of the withdrawal is often exaggerated, as the TAC unit coordinator swore in an affidavit he ordered the units to remain in the general vicinity of the motel, but not within visual distance. Reportedly, the request came from a member of Dr. King's entourage, Reverend Samuel Billy Kiles. Kiles later said this regarding the assassination.
And he was talking to people in the courtyard. He stood here and I stood there. Only as I moved away so he could have a clear shot, the shot rang out.
Whether he was admitting prior knowledge of the sniper and intentionally stepping aside, or merely suggesting the shooter waited for a clear shot, is ultimately up to you to decide. Adding to the speculation, another officer, Edward Reddit, was removed from his post just 2 hours before the assassination. Some allege that was because of his role as security for Dr. King, although Reddit himself stated he was stationed in the firehouse, suggesting he was surveilling Dr. King and couldn't have been able to help. Nonetheless, his partner, Willie B. Richmond, was still on post at the time. The moment he saw Dr. King get shot, he shouted to the TAC unit, sending them racing towards the motel. At the same time, Patrolman Douglas, who was left in the car, got out and ran towards the motel, before returning and radioing to police dispatch that Dr. King had been shot at 6:03. At 6:06, dispatch ordered a roadblock extending 2 blocks around the Lorraine, though at that point, the assassin had likely already driven miles away from the scene. Lieutenant Judson E. Gormley, who headed the TAC unit, initially went with the bulk of the officers towards the motel, then decided to head back and jog along South Main Street. He passed by a music store called Knife's Amusement Company and saw a box wrapped in a bedspread lying on the ground, with the barrel of a Remington Model 760 sticking out. A rifle later identified as the weapon used to kill Dr. King. Officially, it's believed the assassin dropped the bundle while fleeing, which is definitely odd, given it was visible to anyone passing by, though I'll come back with an explanation for why later. Complicating matters further, the bundle contained numerous items tied to the alleged assassin through fingerprints, leading some to argue it was planted, as there likely wasn't enough time for him to gather everything and leave it there before police arrived. However, the bundle included both a box with the rifle cartridges and binoculars, and a separate overnight bag with the rest of the items, suggesting the assassin may have prepared everything in advance, placed the rifle in the box, wrapped both together in the bedspread, and fled. Where it gets more intriguing is that Guy Knipe, the owner who was working at the time, reportedly stated he saw the bundle being dropped 10 minutes before the shot. That being said, that hearsay account originated from the accused assassin's lawyer. In contrast, Knipe told police the following that night. I heard a package drop in my front door and got a glimpse of a man walking away from it. I walked out to the street to see who had laid the stuff there, and no one was in sight. Immediately after, this white Mustang car pulled away from there, and immediately after that, a deputy walked by with his gun drawn. He couldn't have been 2 minutes behind. The only two customers in the store at the time, both of whom were black, also relayed similar information. The alleged assassin is known to have drove a white Mustang, so these witnesses aren't completely unreliable, and as such, officials theorized the sniper fired the shot from a nearby building, more on this later, ran out, saw the lead police car parked at the fire station, and out of panic, dropped the bundle in the recess in front of Knife's, thinking the store was closed, before speeding off in the Mustang. The first problem with this theory arises from Patrolman Douglas, who you may recall was left in the patrol car next to the firehouse, as he insisted he was invisible from Knife's due to how his car was parked. That said, every other officer disputes him. Either way, a hedge, which had been planted alongside the driveway, was later removed. Some have suggested this was part of a police cleanup operation on the night of the assassination, intended to support the claim that the assassin had a clear view of the parked patrol car. Notably, the Public Works Director at the time partially confirmed this.
I received a telephone call from a representative of the police department, and the request was to assist the police in cleaning that lot in looking for evidence.
Yet when asked about when exactly the cleanup started, he answered, "Well, I can't tell you exactly, but if I didn't get the call until after 7, and I called them immediately afterwards, by the time they got crews together and got there, it probably was no earlier than 10 a.m. This timeline challenges the idea of a covert cleanup occurring overnight. Still, some assert that vegetation across the motel was also cleared for two main reasons: to remove a tree that had obstructed the line of sight from the sniper's position, as described in the official narrative, and to eliminate brush on the ground below that could have concealed an alternate shooter. I myself found this theory to be particularly compelling until I uncovered this photograph taken from where Dr. King was standing. Comparing the placement of the police cars with another verified photo from that evening confirms this was captured the evening of the assassination. And as you can see, there is an unobstructed view from the sniper's alleged position. Furthermore, a photo taken the following day reveals no significant changes to the plant life. Despite this, some still support the alternate sniper theory, citing sightings of a mysterious man in the bushes after the shot. Granted, there are few. Harold Cornbread Carter supposedly said he was in the bushes at the time of the shooting, and saw a sniper taking the shot just a few feet from him, but he later recanted, saying that account was fabricated. Solomon Jones, Dr. King's chauffeur in Memphis, also reported seeing a man in the bushes after the shot. However, he added that he noticed an ambulance arriving immediately after. Since the ambulance didn't arrive until 5 minutes after the shooting, it's possible the man he saw, if he indeed saw someone, was a police officer, as several were already searching the area by then. Meanwhile, Earl Caldwell, a reporter staying at the motel, testified to this.
I ran into the doorway to see what happened because I was sure the motel had been bombed. As it happened, the first thing I saw when I looked out the door was a figure in the bushes directly, I would say, directly across to the right of where I was looking when I looked out.
And what was that figure doing?
Well, I couldn't tell. He was doing something in the bushes. I didn't know what he was doing.
Has any FBI agent ever asked you what you saw?
No. No one asked me ever. No FBI agents, no local police, no authorities at all.
While it's odd that he was never questioned, he was eventually interviewed during the Department of Justice investigation in 1999, in which he candidly advised that his best recollection of what he saw was recorded in the contemporaneous account he gave to a New York Times in-house publication called Times Talk. He encouraged us to read the article since he had not read it since its publication. In this highly detailed first-person account, he makes zero mention of seeing anyone in the bushes. Additionally, in both this and other articles, he stated he saw Solomon Jones driving his Cadillac right after seeing this person. Yet Jones claimed he only got in his car once the ambulance had arrived, so he could follow it to the hospital, suggesting Caldwell's recollection is also distorted. While eyewitness reports are vulnerable to misperception, officers recovered a far more tangible piece of evidence of a potential second shooter in a nearby alleyway: footprints. Unfortunately, their origins remain unclear, as there has been no way of determining when they were created. In addition, they were the only pair located in the entire area, despite one of the patrolmen who found the prints stating, "The ground was wet, and if anyone had been walking in this lot, they would have left footprints, because we left footprints when we checked it." Using recovered fingerprints, the FBI identified the assassin as James Earl Ray. Ray was imprisoned for armed robbery, but had escaped a year prior to the assassination. I'll explain his alibi later, but for now, know that he admitted to renting a room across the street from the Lorraine Motel just hours before the assassination. Inside this rooming house, tenants had their own rooms, but shared a bathroom. One was a window with a clear view of Dr. King's room. Two residents gave especially incriminating accounts, and I'll be referencing statements they made the day after the assassination. The first is Charles Stevens, who later became the prosecutor's chief witness. Stevens had spent the entire day in his room, 6B, which is located right next to the bathroom. That afternoon, he saw the landlady renting out the neighboring room, 5B, to a stranger. He later heard someone moving back and forth between the room and the bathroom several times, with the last sound occurring about 30 minutes before the shot. After hearing the shot, he paused briefly, then got up and opened his door. At this point, he saw someone rushing down the hall carrying something, and it immediately occurred to him that it was the same man he had seen renting the room earlier that day. He gave this description to police, and later said Ray was the man he saw. While this may seem like it solves everything, Stevens almost certainly bases his identification from when Ray was renting the room, a fact Ray doesn't deny, rather than when he saw someone run down the hall, which Ray does deny, with him insisting he wasn't there at the time. Moreover, Stevens initially said this when shown a photo of Ray.
Mr. Stevens, what do you think of that picture? Does that look like the man?
Well, excuse me, from the glimpse that I got of his profile, it doesn't.
It doesn't?
No, sir. It certainly doesn't. For one thing, he's too heavy. His face is too full. He has too much hair. And his nose is too wide.
While Stevens alone isn't particularly reliable, much of what he has claimed is corroborated by William Anschutz, a tenant who lived in the other room adjacent to Ray's. Both of them stated that before the shot, Anschutz had asked Stevens who was using the bathroom, with Stevens responding that the new tenant was. Immediately after the shot, both opened their doors and saw an unknown man hurrying towards the front exit carrying something long in his hands. Neither could state for sure whether the man came from the bathroom or the room in between theirs, but Stevens stated Anschutz made some kind of remark to the man, and that the man had replied, with Anschutz stating he had told the man, "I thought I heard a shot," and that the man had answered, "Yeah, it was a shot." The reason why Anschutz was not the chief witness, even though he is arguably more dependable, is because he has maintained he did not get a good look at the man, as the man had turned away from him and used his hand to cover his face. Though the fact that Stevens and Anschutz, who by all available accounts disliked each other, have had practically identical recollections, seems pretty convincing, at least to me, that someone, whether or not it was Ray, had taken the shot from the bathroom using the rifle found in the bundle. Ray eventually pled guilty to killing Dr. King, but later recanted. According to Ray, he met a man named Raoul during his time on the run, who basically framed him. As such, Ray admits to purchasing the recovered rifle and renting the room in the rooming house, but claims he did so solely on Raoul's behalf. Small tangent here, but this Raoul was eventually found and identified by Ray as the same person he had met. If you want to learn more about him, you can read the DOJ investigation's final report, which I linked down below. Now, some have argued Ray couldn't have taken the shot as he barely passed his basic infantry training during his time in the Army, with Ray testifying to the following during the mock trial.
You did qualify as a marksman, did you not?
You have to qualify as a marksman. They'll keep you out there 6 months on the rifle range, yes.
For context, the distance between the bathroom and balcony was roughly 69 yards, 63 meters, and the recovered rifle was equipped with a scope. Ray also conceded this during the cross-examination.
Are you trying to represent to this court and jury that you stayed out there on the range 6 months before you qualified as a marksman?
No, I qualified as a marksman when I first went out there.
It's also worth noting that Grace Walden, Charles Stevens' wife, who was also in the room at the time of the assassination, claimed she saw an entirely different man. While this is certainly intriguing, she gave several conflicting accounts, at one point even saying,
"I don't think the man looked anything like him. First place, I think he was an
You think the man you saw
was an
She was destroyed by the state of Tennessee.
Walden was also later sent to a psychiatric hospital. You can decide for yourself whether she was suffering from mental illness or whether the government decided to silence her. But of course, that still leaves the central question. Did James Earl Ray actually kill Dr. King? Here's what I see as the strongest evidence that there was a broader conspiracy, and that Ray was part of it. While several people saw a white Mustang south of Canipes, many more witnesses inside a restaurant below the rooming house told the FBI a very different story. Though some accounts are hazier than others, I'll agree that one diner's Overture Lane was parked just south of the rooming house, with a Cadillac ahead of it, followed by a white Mustang, which disappeared after the shooting. A photo taken that evening corroborates their accounts exactly. If Ray indeed parked his Mustang in front of the rooming house, it would obliterate the official story, as he would have had to run all the way for no apparent reason to drop the bundle, then run back to his car. I have no reason to doubt these customers, as their accounts are all compatible with one another, and they were mostly regulars who parked in the same spots, which explains why they would notice the unfamiliar car. Only one questionable witness saw both, but the rest overlap to imply two distinct Mustangs. I honestly don't know how to satisfyingly reconcile these accounts, and as far as I can tell, there has been no successful attempt at doing so. If these customers' memories are accurate, then the simplest explanation is that the car in front of the rooming house was Ray's, as Ray has contended, and the car near Knife's was driven by somebody trying to frame him. On the other hand, Ray's entire alibi is riddled with inconsistencies, but I'm just going to analyze part of it. Ray claims he was at a gas station a couple blocks away during the shooting. When he came back to the rooming house, he found a police roadblock and, thinking something was wrong, started making a getaway. These are some crucial statements he gave about how he discovered that Dr. King was killed.
I had the radio on. There's a report on the radio that Martin Luther King had been shot. There was a report that they were looking for a white man in a white Mustang, which could have fit my description.
So you heard the news on the radio? Is that the way you heard it?
When I had the radio on, I used to keep the radio on.
I had the radio on. It said something about Martin Luther King being shot. It said that they looked for a white man in a white Mustang in connection with the shooting. So I decided then I better, move on out of there.
After thinking he was set up for Dr. King's murder, he drove 11 hours to Atlanta, Georgia, where he abandoned his Mustang. The FBI recovered it and filed a report a week later. In this report, which was written months before Ray was captured, is the following statement. The radio in the vehicle was noted to be a Ford radio, Fomoco, and not in working order. It's up to you to decide how credible this document is. Of course, there's always the tiny possibility the radio broke during the week it was left abandoned in the parking lot. But proponents of government conspiracy theories are more likely to revert to their primary argument, that the FBI fabricated this report just like they fabricated every other bit of damning evidence. Let's consider this scenario. To my knowledge, this specific report has only ever been cited once by the aforementioned DOJ investigation 30 years after the assassination. If the FBI forged this, wouldn't they have plastered this everywhere? And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there is still no conclusive evidence Ray was the assassin. So why didn't the FBI fake something even more damaging against him? I have barely scratched the surface of Dr. King's assassination. For instance, I have not even mentioned the civil trial that found the government liable for Dr. King's death. If you want to learn more about that, I once again suggest reading the DOJ investigations report. My aim was not to solve this case. Instead, I wanted to combat the large amount of blatant misinformation. I'm an open-minded dude who believed in the government conspiracy theory. But after uncovering how much information being circulated was completely false, I felt I had to provide something for people who don't want to just settle for definitely fascinating, yet ultimately facile explanations. That being said, I didn't even know Dr. King was assassinated until a year ago, which I take as a hopeful sign that the dissension surrounding his death hasn't eclipsed his legacy.